Something you may need to consider in your A2 law exam is whether or not we should have a Good Samaritan law in this country. Just to recap, what this is a law that places a legal obligation on people to help others who may be in danger. There are many different versions of this rule throughout the world. Some jurisdictions will have a diet version of this rule, which simply states that people who come to the rescue of others will not be considered liable for damages of any kind unless they have been grossly negligent in their rescue attempts. Okay, on the other hand, other countries have a more extreme rule, which is basically a duty to rescue. So that means that somebody could be prosecuted and even sent to prison if they fail to at least try and rescue somebody who is in need. Okay, this is the situation that exists in a few jurisdictions throughout the world. Now, I've put together this video to help you try and evaluate the Good Samaritan law in a practical context. The context I've used is that of people attempting to climb Mount Everest, the world's highest mountain. Now, when people climb Mount Everest, the unwritten rule in the death zone, as the top part of Everest is known as, since there's a lot less oxygen, a lot of people die there from oxygen starvation, cerebral edema, pulmonary edema, all these conditions brought on because the human body simply isn't built to exist at such high altitudes. The unwritten rule in the death zone is that if somebody starts to die, then they are left there for dead. Their fellow teammates, climbers, will just walk on past them and leave them to die. That is like the unwritten rule. There's around 200 dead bodies in the death zone on Everest, and they can't even bring them down because they're too high up. It's too much of a struggle for people to be able to actually bring the bodies down because of the oxygen levels are so low. What I'd like you to do is think about how the Good Samaritan law would actually apply to some of these people and some of these situations. Under a Good Samaritan law, would they be prosecuted for leaving a fellow climber to die on the side of a mountain? If not, should they be prosecuted? Would a strict Good Samaritan law even be practical to enforce in such conditions? Should you be legally obliged to help somebody else, even if it means putting your own life in danger? Remember, in places like Scotland and Wales, and to a lesser extent the Alps in France and Italy, Switzerland even, there is actually the possibility of mountain rescue services, which usually involve a helicopter that comes along to help people out. However, on Everest, no helicopter rescues are actually possible at present due to the altitude. So conditions up there are a bit more extreme than what we're used to in this country. However, it is quite possible to envisage situations whereby a person, either rock climbing or mountaineering up in Scotland or Wales or even a Lake District, could be faced with a situation whereby they either help their friend back down or risk dying themselves in the process. And would a Good Samaritan rule really be practical in those kind of situations? What about if there's been a car crash, for example, and somebody either has to leave the car, which may be about to explode, or try and stay in the car and rescue a passenger and potentially put their own life at risk? Okay, there's a lot of different ways you can look at the Good Samaritan law, and I'm going to leave you to consider it in the light of these next few clips. I must warn you, some aspects of it are quite distressing. There's images of dead bodies on the side of mountains and people with bad frostbite. Now, you have been warned. If you feel that's going to disturb you in any way, then please don't watch it.
When you go to a place like Everest, where you can be faced with extreme conditions and very difficult circumstances, one of the things that it does is exposes people. It exposes actually who you are and what your character is. And that's not always a pretty thing.
The highest summit in the world, standing at the cruising altitude of much commercial jet traffic, Everest not only shows a climber his true nature, but also has a potent and disturbing effect on his mind.
And so I wound up trying to take off 2 of the 3 pairs of gloves on that side because I was going to take that arm, put it up underneath my coat on my skin until I could get the heat from my body to warm it back up. Unfortunately, the second I took my gloves off, the skin was instantly frostbitten. And it was just like a searing pain that rolled up my arm. And it startled me to the point that I loosened those grip on those gloves on my left side, and all of a sudden I now am without gloves on one side.
After nightfall, temperatures on Everest get down to minus 20 degrees. With the storm, the wind chill factor must have been getting on for minus 40, a temperature in the face of which the human body begins to shut down.
It's just like taking a very slow anesthetic. Things get distant from you. You start to feel like you're just floating along over the surface, and you begin to lose any touch with the reality of what's going on around you, and then you simply disappear.
Weathers and climbing colleague Yasuko Namba were found the following morning when the storm had abated, alive but barely breathing.
One of the doctors who was up there had basically said he's still alive, but he's not going to, certainly not going to be savable at this point.
The harsh but fundamental rule in the death zone is that if you can't walk, you are left to die. This is because mere survival at this altitude is so tough that no one has the physical strength to drag, let alone carry someone else to safety. To do so would be to risk your own life.
There is a brutal edge of survivability above, let's say, 27,000, 28,000 feet, the final band of the mountain. And it's almost a cold, rational awareness that you yourself are beyond help. And that is the reason why morally correct behavior seems to go out of the window.
Six hours after having been triaged, left for dead, Beck Weathers rewrote what was survivable at high altitude.
Late that afternoon, maybe an hour before dark, I managed to wake up. I opened my eyes, and I had a rather clear, crystalline vision of my wife and children before me, and it drove me to my feet, and it kept me moving till I got into camp.
I thought Beck's survival was a miracle. That somebody could, as I understand it, actually lose consciousness outside on the ice in those conditions and come round and then have the mental focus, the willpower to start to crawl. That is amazing.
Beck Weathers' survival has called further into question the death zone convention of leaving those who cannot walk for dead.
The decision to triage us to death, I understand. I don't know that I would agree with it, certainly not in retrospect, because obviously I made it. I don't think that morality changes with altitude. I don't think your obligations to other people change with altitude.
Yes, you're above 8,000 meters, but does it absolve you of being human? Does it absolve you of being feeling and helping people? It doesn't. I mean, we're responsible. We need to rise to that occasion and help people.
Well, there's nothing you can do if someone's unconscious. There's no way that I could carry them. You know, I can't sling someone over my shoulder and carry them down steep ground. There's nothing you can do if they're unconscious. It was pretty clear he was probably going to die.
But I think there is a very strong sense that there is a line that once you've crossed over it, you really are beyond help on Everest, and everyone you look at is in exactly the same position that you are, and that you can't help them, and they probably almost certainly can't help you. And I think that is where the moral boundaries become very fuzzy indeed.
The single-minded determination required for climbing in the death zone brings with it an inherent moral dilemma when a climber is confronted by another climber in trouble. Bruce Harrod's teammates faced just this dilemma in 1998 on the north side of Everest. when Kathy O'Dowd was attempting to become the first woman ever to summit from both south and north sides. 2 hours into her summit attempt, at about 8,600 meters, she came across a body in the snow.
I got next to the figure, brushed the hair back from the face, and it was a woman. And that moment was just horrible. She had this long brown hair. And just for a minute, I felt as if I was looking in a mirror into my own future. And then the logical stuff clicked in. I started thinking, okay, what do I do?
The person she'd found was Fran Arsantiev, who'd collapsed descending from the summit.
She spoke to me. She said, don't leave me. I mean, it's not a great thing to hear. And then Ian's talking into her face, got her by the shoulders, trying to work out how coherent she is, and saying, look, we will help you, but you've got to help us. And she just stared at Ian with these huge pupils, like there's no reaction. And we figured at that point that she was not going to live long enough for wherever we could carry her to.
Kathy and Ian were not alone on the north ridge of the mountain that day.
3 Uzbekistan climbers who have been coming up behind us come up, and we ask them if they'll help. They don't look very enthusiastic, but they do stop. And they're simply standing there watching us, waiting to see what we're going to decide. We pretty much looked at them and said, we don't think we can do anything. And they shrugged and went on.
I don't think you can just justify walking by somebody. For what purpose? To summit? You know, how important is that? If you've got somebody dying in front of you, whatever effort you still have left within you should be expended towards saving that person. Whether or not you may decide that you don't have the strength or the wherewithal to save that person, but that's a different issue than continuing on toward the summit.
The reality may be that you may not be able to help somebody. But even if you do nothing else but sit down with them in their last moments and they have something to tell you, that's not a small thing. And even though that maybe I can't lift the guy across my shoulders and carry him down, I think you still have that obligation, that human connection.
But even the simple gesture of bearing witness is fraught with danger when you are just 400 meters below the summit of Everest.
And I was really worried that if I sat down next to her for a number of hours, I might not stand up again. And then again, I'm not just putting myself at risk, I'm putting the rest of my team at risk, because if I can't stand, suddenly they're stuck with trying to evacuate me down the mountain. So you're trying to balance a dozen different choices, responsibilities, and make a decision.
It's beyond just climbing ethos and understanding. These are, human moral dilemmas that people face in different walks of life all the time. They're faced in family matters where somebody has an incurable disease and they're on life support. And until you're in that situation, I don't think we can really understand what those true, deep feelings are that somebody may have about their decision that they make.
When the trouble a climber is in is principally of their own making, the dilemma becomes even more complicated. Fran Arsantiev had taken some extraordinary risks. She and her partner Sergei, whose body has never been found, had chosen to attempt Everest without supplemental oxygen, hugely increasing the risk of deadly high-altitude sickness and hypothermia. And this despite Fran never having climbed higher than 7,500 meters.
copy? Yeah, Max. There's a man here underneath the rock. I think he's about to die. Ross, he's unconscious. He's shivering. Is there anything we can do for this guy? Over.
Can he talk at all?
Negative, negative. He's shivering and he's alive still, but he's unconscious and obviously he's not hearing what is over.
Can you get his oxygen back on?
Shall I shove his oxygen mask back on his face? Over?
Yeah, I mean, if he's, is it got oxygen flowing, Max?
His oxygen bottle is depleted. Listen, I'm going to try and give him some oxygen from my bottle because I have 12 bars.
Yeah, Max, you can try giving him your oxygen, but, you know, it's not going to get him down the hill. I can see where you are, so it's up to you. You can try and give him oxygen, and you can revive him, but what are we going to do with him after that?
He's a huge guy. He's almost the size of Tim.
Yeah, Max, I know it's hard, but you know, where do we get any help? There's no more help I can see on the mountain in the immediate future to carry him down and get him down. So you can try giving him your oxygen, or you can just walk on over.
Max is he's a good man.
And it's not going to make it.
It's easy for me sitting down here on my ass at 21,000 feet. What's good? Those guys are up there at 28 just barely hanging on. And then they come across something like that. Yeah, Max is a hero. He's a good man.
Okay. Stop shivering now. I'm just going to put the cylinder back on and leave it the way it was. Max, there's not much you can do, you know?
We don't know what team he's from, nothing. And obviously his team members not taking any care for him. They don't know where he is. So I don't know, Max. You can't do much, but come down yourself, really.
It's tough for Max.
Okay. Just gonna put in.
Poor Max. Sounds like he's starting to lose a little.
I would too, man. It's tough.
I would too.
It's been 10 minutes since Max found the dying man in the death zone. Now, expedition guide Woody adds to the drama.
The man that Max is worrying about was there this morning. He obviously didn't see him when he walked past him. He's very badly frostbitten. And it's not going to make a horrible thing to say, but that's what it is.
I'm sorry, Max. You know, it's tough, man. And, you know, you can't do much with him. We need maybe 20 people to be able to bring one big man down from where you are right now.
And they're all going to get hurt in the process of doing it, unfortunately.
Okay, I understand. Okay. Okay, Ross. Okay.
Yeah, Max, I'm sorry. I'm sorry it's so hard. But we can't do much, man.
Okay, I'm coming down.
Max may be safely down, but his thoughts are up on the mountain. There are almost 200 dead bodies on its slopes, many in plain view of the climbers. Each year, that number grows.
To pass by a dead man who's been there a long time is one thing. And to pass by somebody who's dying right there, it's ridiculous. Why people come here to die?
The first man to summit Everest, Sir Edmund Hillary, judged it the selfish behaviour of a modern generation of climbers.
Their aim is to get to the summit, and the welfare of anybody on the way is just too bad. I think Mark Engels was a bit crazy. He put in a great battle to reach the summit. But I don't approve of the fact that he just rang up base camp and said, well, the fellow up here, what do I do about it? And the head of the expedition said, oh, he's been there long enough now, he'll be dead, so don't worry about it. I mean, that attitude is, to me, is pathetic. He was a human being, and we would regard it as our duty to get him back to safety.
On top of the world, mate, over. Still on top of the summit at the moment, are you? Yes, I'm sleeping, over.
On the 25th of May, 1996, Bruce Harrod found himself on the summit of Everest at 5 p.m. local time.
Firstly, congratulations, mate. And secondly, man, you really got to get your ass down here, eh? Over.
Bruce Harrod could not have had better conditions for his summit attempt. He had a perfect weather window and plenty of supplemental oxygen. Yet still, he died. Harrod was the 832nd person to summit Everest and the 144th to die. Understanding why Harrod died is to understand something of the effect that this mountain has on the people who get near its summit.
Bruce came up to me and he gave me this big hug. And my first question to him was, are you okay? Because he was definitely slow. For Bruce, this was slow. And he said to me something along the lines of, I had a bad night, but I'm feeling really good now. And then he started to quiz me about the ridge. I mean, I just assumed Bruce would turn around with us. And then I thought, he's going on. He intends to go on. And I was quite disconcerted about that. I wasn't sure what to say. So I was kind of answering his questions, and then Ian comes up behind us. He and Bruce shake hands, and Ian joins the conversation.
What happened when Bruce actually met Ian and Kathy, I don't think we're ever going to know the content of the conversation. I think a highly experienced climber who no longer needs that sort of emotional attachment to the idea that it's the summit or nothing would have said, you are going to die if you do this. Perhaps such a bold statement might have triggered, a return to common sense.
Despite Bruce appearing articulate and focused during this conversation, perhaps both Ian and Kathy, and most importantly, Bruce himself, should have realized from his slow progress that there was something physically wrong with him. He may have felt fine, but on the summit of Everest, there are no margins for error.
Bruce was very enthusiastic, very energetic, very strong in his own right, but he didn't have the crucial amount of experience to make summiting a safe endeavor. And the people who were with him should have recognized that in him, should have realized that it was late, should have just done whatever they could have done, cajoling, encouraging, dragging him down if they needed to, and just say, listen, this mountain will be here next year and the next year and the next year, but you need to come down. You need to come down now.
I know people think that Ian should have been more autocratic and ordered Bruce down. Well, I quite frankly think that Bruce's response would have been, stuff off. And then what are you supposed to do? Take out your ice axe and threaten to hit Bruce if he doesn't turn round? And then what have you got? A fist fight at 8,500 meters on Everest? We are adults. We should be allowed to make choices. We should also be allowed to take responsibility for our own choices and not forever seek to blame somebody else.
It's delusional to say that they're not responsible, that people are up there individually and behaving as individuals or behaving as a group of two and a group of one. I mean, that's utterly absurd, especially given what had taken place just a scant few weeks earlier.
The outcome of the conversation was that the group, once again, separated. We will never know how Bruce was feeling, but we can assume he was utterly in the grip of summit fever. As the last member of the last team on the mountain that season, he was also totally alone.
We got back to our Camp 4 about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and now we're sitting with the radios on standby waiting. And he doesn't call, and he doesn't respond when we try and call him. So again, we assumed he'd turned round. And then at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we get a radio call from him. And Ian's first thing was, "Bruce, where the hell are you?" And Bruce says, "I'm on the summit." And my heart just sank. He took too long. He took way too long.
Yeah, thanks very much, mate. Just made it. I'm not going to screw up now. Over.
To add to the puzzle, here was a man who'd already taken 17 hours to reach the summit. Must have been exhausted, but sounded completely compos mentis. And would probably have happily chatted for another sort of 5 minutes, unless I'd said, "You've got to get out of there, you've got to get down."
The team kept their radios on standby to chart Bruce's progress down the mountain.
And we waited. And we waited. I mean, at base camp, they stayed awake all night. At Camp 4, we eventually fell asleep out of sheer exhaustion. And then I came awake again, and it was dawn. And then I thought he was dead.
Died last year. He died because he did not turn around in time.
Max is descending and is close to Gerard and Tim on the snow slope.
Poor boy, I'm not happy with what's happening. These guys are just struggling and they're not gaining anything. Tim, you can't climb a mountain on your hands and knees. Now turn around, please, right now. Tim, I want you to stop there. You're struggling and I do not want you to go any further. Please come back from there. I do not want you to die. I don't want my shippers to die trying to look after you. I want you to come back.
Bottom line is we all sat there in the tent and agreed to Russell's.
Russ is the man,
you know,
and you know his words.
Turn around. You're agreeing right now that you're going to turn around.
Yeah, that's very simple.
Russell tries a new tactic to get Tim to see reason.
Okay, Tim, I'm going to take my Sherpas home, and you can be by yourself.